Protect, and then on top of that, it looks like there's just a little bit of brown. It's not much more anyway. Time to mix some epoxy and fill some holes. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna mix 5 parts of this West Systems 105 with 5 parts of the Fast Cure Hardener 205. Add a little bit of silica, which, I mean, this is in a different container, just the powder thickener, until we probably get about maybe a ketchup consistency. If I was just filling with that, I'd probably get it more to a peanut butter consistency. But I want to add some glass to kind of add a bit of structure to it. We had a lot of trouble with our pumps last time, the little pumps that you buy for these things. They're like 20 bucks. They work really well at making the right amount come out, and you know, you don't have to think about mixing it or ratios or anything. But the problem we had, and I think it was mostly because we were coming from a cold environment to a hot environment and back and forth because the days, you know, kept getting warm and cold. What was happening was the pumps were actually leaking and making a mess all over where we were storing it. So we decided not to use the pumps, and we're gonna try these little syringes. So we got our measurements that we made up on them, and we'll just do our portions this way. So we added the resin in the hardener, and you mix up the hardener with the resin until it's thoroughly mixed. You get all the corners, and then you can add the silica or whatever hardener you're using and whatever else you want to put. Really don't want to inhale this stuff, so wear a mask when you're doing it, or just hold your breath. Alright, we're just adding more fiberglass, chopped up strand, making like this paste. Really quite thick actually. Make sure all the glass, get rid of the long piece, make sure all the glass is mixed in with the resin. Now this, some people call this kitty hair. There's a few names for it. You can buy it like this in some places, but you can also make it. Hey buddy! I'm just gonna kind of slap it in place for now. It's already getting quite warm, so that fast hardener is certainly gonna...
Almost too fast?
Almost, but I think it'll work. It's kind of like working with snot.
We have Cory in the hole over there trying to fiberglass the rudder.
Smooth as butter. Alright, I'm just putting some of this marine Bondo, really old stuff, so I don't even know if it's going to work properly. And I think I added a little bit too much hardener. But basically I'm just filling in a few of the little gaps here and covering up some of the bare lead. Because I figure bare lead, I mean, the inner protect will probably stick to it, but I figure this will make a nicer surface for the inner protect to stick to. So I'm just covering up a few of the little spots, little divots. And hopefully this stuff is still good because it is super old and it was looking a little bit bad, but should do the trick. If not, we'll just sand it away. Well, we're finally done all the sanding of everywhere other than underneath these pads. Actually, somebody was messaging us on YouTube. They were kind of curious about how you get the paint and sand underneath these pads. So basically, there's enough pads all the way around to support the boat, even if you remove one of these pads, because most of the weight is actually down on the keel. And if you're paranoid about it, you can normally ask for another stand and just put the other stand there first and then remove this stand. But I've done this before, so I have a pretty good idea. Ooh. So basically, you want to loosen it. Watch that nothing is moving on you when you loosen it off. Just a little bit. Now I'm going to slide her over. out of the way. And then tighten it back up. And you know it's tight when you shake it and it's not going anywhere. Some of them, if you put them too high up the hull, they're gonna slide up. But normally there's chains hooked up between them so they don't do that. This one's quite tight because these ones are higher up. And I wouldn't leave them there normally. Ideally I'd have them low, but because I have a patch here, I had to put them a little higher for now. Once I sand, I'll move them all back because that'll be the more secure spot to leave them. I can't even tell you how many layers of bottom paint, and in some areas there's actually some inner protect on top of it. So what I'm using is a belt sander, 32 grit, and then I'm switching to the 80 grit for the fine tunings because this is going to leave some pretty deep scratches, as you'll be able to tell over here where I just started to go. I've already gotten rid of the first layer, and you know it kind of scratches it. So you want to use the 80 grit to clean that up after. Got to get the music going, that's important. Good old mask for protection. You'd be surprised I actually have a fairly good seal on this, even though it doesn't look like it. Woo! And bang!
This is the keel, and as Cory was trying to clean around, this whole chunk came off. And there's like bundle and fiberglass, so it looks like someone already hit the ground pretty hard and had to fix it. Now we're gonna have to fix his fix.
So I decided I'm gonna fill this foam hole with some filler. Oh man, I didn't mix the filler very well, so I gotta mix it on here now. So this is Total Works fairing compound. I really like it because you mix one part to one part, and when you do mix it, you know it's thoroughly mixed because the blue and the yellow mix to make this green color. And if you have any blue or yellow kind of standing out, then you know it's not mixed well. You'll see it'll end up being green like that instead of the yellow and blue streaks. Once I get rid of it and I spear it out, you can see it's a nice consistent color, and that's what you want. You know it's nice and mixed. All right, let's get some of this on here. Spread it fairly thin. There we go. This is why I like this product so much. It just seems to fare in really nicely, and it's easy to work with. Making a mess of it. Putting a little epoxy on top of our patches here with some filler and a little bit of chop strand tore up over top of the places where I actually removed a decent amount of glass. And then we'll sand this away and it should be nicely sealed up. Alex, actually I'm gonna get you to cut a patch about the size of this, and we're gonna put the patch over top. Since I filled it with the kitty hair and thickened epoxy here, we won't need smaller patches, but I at least want to put a layer or two of glass over top of this whole thing. One.
So you want the small pieces to start?
Yep. Go ahead and put them on the cardboard so we can pre-glass them. Well, any of those small strands. Alright.
So we're using epoxy resin because it's going on top of something. There's polyester resin and epoxy resin.
And vinyl ester resin is another one.
Right.
So we're just pre-wetting the area here. Whoop. So that it sticks better, and then we're gonna roll it on with some more resin. I'm wetting out the glass here to make sure we have a good super wet glass so that it adheres well. You might be asking why I decided to do this. Well, for one thing, when we're scrubbing the bottom of the hull with a scraper, the barnacles were always getting caught right at this seam, and the scraper just got caught all the time. So it was kind of annoying to scrape the bottom. So my thought here is getting rid of this edge. Basically, we could have just used filler, but I figured if we had the fiberglass, we had the epoxy, let's add some strength to it as well. So my goal here was to make it so, I mean, the keel bolts are holding the lead keel to the hull, of course, that's the main thing. But this is kind of, I guess, a little bit of a lamination to the hull, just like you would have a encapsulated keel, kind of like that. Of course, it's not fully encapsulated, but at least the first part is kind of connected with glass to the main hull. And that's my thought process behind it. But honestly, mostly it's just getting rid of this groove, so it's easier for getting rid of barnacles and stuff like that. And also the barnacles won't set as easily in this because it's glass, so they're not, the barnacles seem to stick really well to the bare metal here, especially when we get a spot like this or something where it's bare metal showing. I've noticed that the inner protect doesn't sit well to bare metal, so I've been using fairing compound, or in this case I used a little bit of epoxy to give it a better surface to adhere to. Now, I mean, a lot of this is just experiments, so I can't say this is what you should do, but I like trying new things and seeing if it works better or worse. Another reason why we decided to do this was over here we had a slight crack. Now, I had filled the crack with fairing compound, but if we're gonna crack any more, the fairing compound is not gonna hold it. So I figured if I put a little more glass over here and along the edge, we'll have less of the typical smile. Now, we only had a small crack, but I figured if I can beef it up, hopefully it'll eliminate cracks from happening in the future. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, it's gonna look good when it's done. Well, this is a bit of a mess now, but I think it's gonna be a lot better in the end. So if you look over here, I started doing some filling and it was working out fine with the Total Boat Works filler, and you know, it's doing the trick. But then our friend Lee came over and suggested that I use some of this kitty, I mean, he calls it kitty hair, but it's basically Bondo hair, long strand reinforcement fiberglass filler. So basically it's kind of like, it's just like Bondo or filler, but it's made with fiberglass strands in it, so it's going to be a lot stronger. And I mean, I wasn't really going for strength here, as I told you before. It was more just to blend it, but this will fill the area a lot faster completely, which I wasn't actually going to do because I was starting to realize I was going to use too much of the other filler, and it's fairly expensive, whereas this stuff is really cheap. This is still a little sticky. Once this dries, I'm going to sand down all the high spots and then do one last, you know, gentle fair with the Total Boat product filler, and that should be good. It'll be so much nicer scraping and not getting stuck with the scraper, and hopefully maybe it'll even give us a little more speed because everything will be a little more streamlined, but maybe that's hoping for too much. But thanks a lot, Lee, for giving us this product, or letting us try this out and suggesting it.
We're gonna 5200 it to the boat, and hopefully there's no leak. Really, we're not gonna find out up until we go in the water. But that one is gonna go into the hole that was already there for the other one. They're both 2 inches.
Huge. transducer!
That's an exciting moment. Filling up our holes. Otherwise we'll be sinking. And I'm really hoping this kind of transducer actually works out good. Because it's not the fanciest. Not the cheapest either. So we'll see.
I think it is the cheapest. The cheapest version that I found that other people seem to be working.
Oh well.
Alright, I'll go inside and pull on it. One thing I don't like about this thing is like you gotta squeeze it so hard. So if you have to do a serious application of anything, this is not good.
Okay.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have way more than what we need. It's gonna make a bit of a mess, but it's okay.
And it's in. I've got it hand tight because it's all plastic, so you can't really use any tools. It's all gonna be hand tight.
So how difficult was that one wire to run through the boat? I'm so proud of you.
I think I spent like quite a few hours between running into trouble from getting the depth transducer in the hull, the wire under the fridge, under the stove, under the electrical compartment, under the compressor, where there was so many wraps. I had to remove that little vent here to access anything, and then run it into the engine compartment, into that little box of like 10 different wires that there's not enough space, with screws that are all stripped. So I've been using like a vice grip to remove all of them, and gave up on the last one that was just so stuck I twisted the wood. But wow, being pregnant means I am now also an electrician, because I can't do anything outside with the chemicals.
But you're doing a great job.
I'm gonna get it done. And it's gonna go up here, so it's gonna go through that wall also. Holy my.
Just going through a mess of wires and removing the wire that connected the DC panel to our alternator and running it over to our new lithium bank instead, which is going to be just on the other side of the kitchen there. I'll just check on it for the first little while. I also will need to put in a temperature sensor and a couple more wires. Well, actually, this is going to be the main these two will be the main wires. Maybe we'll have 2 terminals on the outside or something. Still got to figure out the details.
Ooh, it's freezing today. It's like blowing 30, 40 knots, and it's only 9 degrees. Really, really cold. I'm actually shaking trying to film myself, but Cory's been a trooper.
This is awesome! We're off-grid! Completely off-grid using this orbital sander. It draws 5.7 amps. Plus we have a heater going inside. I can't ask for anything more. Now hopefully we get full capacity at least. Alright, well, we got the rudder pretty much all sealed up, other than the bottom because we're still draining water from it, unfortunately. But we're gonna reseal the shaft because I'm pretty sure that's where the water's coming in. And before we did 5200, but we didn't grind in, so now we're gonna overkill it. So basically, I've grinded out around the rudder just to give it a nice surface to grab to. I'm gonna put 5200 in here, kind of make it like a gasket, let it set. And so that'll be one layer of seal, and then I'm going to use some filled epoxy, maybe even a light mat of glass, and kind of go up maybe just a finger width, because I can't go up too much, but just to kind of give, actually I won't fit glass mat in there, so I'll probably just use filled epoxy because there's not a whole lot to raise up. And basically that's the hope is to make 2 layers instead of just the 1 layer. We'll have 2 layers of protection before water gets into the rudder.
We were trying to remove the water scum line by hand with some compound and a magic eraser, but not much luck. Then we tried with a high grit sandpaper on the orbital sander, and it went so much faster. There's also some products to remove this, like on and off, but we haven't tried it yet. Goodbye, yellow hull. Afterwards, it was time to do a quick wax of the hull. To be honest, I think eventually we'll need to just repaint the whole thing.
A little better.